Hello, and welcome back to For the Penguins. I am your host, Micaela Miligota. Thank you so much for listening in. Last week, we talked with Hester about the sustainable fashion industry. It was a super interesting conversation, so feel free to check that out. This week, we're talking with Josh Bayer about the electric vehicle industry. He's a senior prototype engineer at Rivian, and we're going to be talking a lot about the challenges that the industry has had to overcome, as well as all the challenges that have yet to come. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy. Hi, Josh. Welcome to For the Penguins. I'm so excited that you're here. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, Mika. Thanks for having me. My name's Josh. I am in the automotive industry, focusing on early product development within electric vehicles and specifically in the sustainability space within that. So glad to be here.
All right. So I'm very excited for this conversation. I think you have a kind of a dream job for a lot of electrical engineers out there. But can you explain a bit more? What is your job? What does your day-to-day look like? Why is it important? And why is it sustainable?
Absolutely. So I think the funny part of this question is the day-to-day part because there really isn't a day-to-day, but I am in the special projects department at an electric vehicle manufacturer. So what that means is that I focus on very high complexity, high cost, low volume solutions for really any sort of problem there is within the business. But the main focus on that is in our early products. So next generation vehicles, test vehicles, or next generation technology explorations, helping either ourselves or another team. So
When I first asked you to do this interview, right, I was like, oh, I'm trying to interview people that have sustainable jobs. And your first answer was like, oh, no, that's not me. That's not my job. Can you explain a bit more why you thought that your job wasn't sustainable if you're focused on such early electric vehicle design?
yeah, so what's really interesting with us is that sustainability is built into the business and it's not necessarily part of my specific role. However, there are entire teams focused just on sustainable analyzing data, sustainable products, sustainable processes, etc. I'm not part of that group, but it's something that kind of lives within the business. And then as we're producing products, obviously as an electric vehicle, as part of our business being dedicated towards sustainability and sustainable causes, I'm somewhat peripheral to that stuff there.
Well, I know like your company's mission statement includes like preserving the natural world for generations to come. Do you not feel like you're doing that by designing the next version of electric vehicles?
I think I am. I think my specific, I think my specific role definitely is focused on creating a platform that then other people can, push into the market and again try and drive the entire industry towards more sustainable practices. So I would say I'm at the forefront of that sort of development.
I love that.
Good call.
Thank you. So I know that when you started at your company, there were only, you mentioned 3 electric vehicles really in the market, or it was very early development. How has that growth been for you?
Yeah, it's been awesome. So what was really interesting is I got hired into effectively a marketing role out of electrical engineering. We had 3 vehicles that were, again, very early prototypes for what we were trying to do. And they required full-time engineers to be able to support these, moving them around the country, make, updates to them, fix them, etc. And to go from that position of hey, this vehicle works, to holy crap, we now have tens of thousands on the road and we see them all the time in such a short few year time frame it's really satisfying. It really, really is.
That is really awesome. So,
Yeah.
so how did you get in on the ground floor of this electric vehicle company?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have always been into automotive. I think you knew this, knowing me through college. I did all of my experience through my co-op in automotive, and I was pretty set on it. But what I found is that I was very much interested in next generation technologies, right? So automotive, which has been traditionally dominated by the combustion vehicles, to me was a part of the industry that was changing, right? And from the early onset, I was like, okay, I want to focus on electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles because that's where the industry is going. And so when I was looking for roles, I was definitely focused on finding a company that I can, really grow within the electric or autonomous vehicle space. And when I was looking, I found this role that was like a holy crap, that would be super cool. You get to travel around the country with a brand new automaker. It's electric SUVs and trucks, and it's really pushing the sustainability kind of image and brand, right? And I was like, all right, I gotta apply to this one. Not really thinking I would ever get anything from it because it's such a small company. Week later, I had an offer, and I was like, oh my God, like this is actually possible. And I just had that gut feeling. I was like, all right, we're going to do this. I'm going to take this instead of going back to, my co-op company or another large automaker and just try it. And now I'm still here.
It worked out. So were you nervous about it being labeled as a marketing position because you studied electrical engineering in college?
Not really. So the position itself was actually titled as an engineer position, but it was on a team which was called show car team. There wasn't necessarily a department to support this. It was a brand new team that was getting stood up. And so for me, it was just so exciting to be new and traveling and brand new products and meeting new people. And obviously having grown up watching auto reviewers and going to auto shows, I'm like, this is awesome to get into this world. We're just going to do it, right? So I was nervous at first, not understanding necessarily having the media side of it, or how do you talk to people about this certain product. In fact, within a week, I was now talking to strangers about this product that I just learned about, and it was definitely daunting at first, but it was a whole lot of fun, and being thrown right into the fire was kind of the kick I needed to get ready into a real career.
I think a lot of people kind of struggle, especially when leaving college, to, should I go for like a brand new company, doesn't have as much reputation, maybe I haven't seen at the job fairs, versus a company that has been around for a while. Would you recommend going for a newer company out of college?
I think it depends on the person, right? So I myself am very much a self-starter, and I kind of find my own path within constraints, I guess, but even outside those constraints. That's not for everyone, right? There's a lot of people, especially within engineering, who really enjoy rigid workflows, rigid structures, rigid processes, and they thrive within that. I don't. So for me, this was definitely a time that I was like, okay, this is very different from, what I've worked in the past, which were, again, very large corporations. And we're talking, 60 to 300,000 people. So to join a company that, it still isn't even that small, it was about 1,500-ish people when I joined, seemed kind of crazy, but it had enough of a foundation for me to not be super worried about it. But if you're a self-starter and you're kind of looking to make your own path and, have a real chunk of ownership within what you do, absolutely look at those different companies. Just because it doesn't necessarily have a name now doesn't mean it won't in the future. So
nice. I think that's great advice. So would you say that doing the co-ops during your college years, because I know a lot of people also struggle with deciding to do a co-op, how to get internships, was that an integral part of you getting this cool job out of college? And if so, like how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So co-ops, I think, are probably one of the best tool that anyone can have during their college degree, right? And the reason I say this is because when you're in classes, it's a very defined and somewhat ubiquitous structure that every student is going through, and it doesn't necessarily let you either focus on what you're interested in all the time or gain that real world experience that, is so wildly different from what it's like in the classroom. So I actually decided to go to a school that had a massive co-op program, as you know. And from that, I was like, okay, this is my time to explore, right? And doing that co-op, it gave me a foundation of like, okay, I'm in the electric vehicle space, but I'm starting within kind of the, control space within diesel, and then moving into some, mild hybrid stuff, and then full electric vehicles. I got to see that all before I was done with college, right? And I even had a time after that to say, okay, I really want to do electric vehicles. I want to try and see something else before that to confirm myself. So I actually went to go work in oil for a little bit, right? So I was technically in the energy industry for, a hot minute. Decided that was totally not for me, and went right back even deeper into electric vehicles. So the co-op itself, massive, massive boost in, I think, anyone's understanding of what it is as an industry. Do I think it helped me get the job? Absolutely, right? You get so much relevant experience within an area and real world experience at a company that's not just a summer internship, right? When you're doing a co-op, you're returning, you're building on skills, you're meeting new people all within the constraints of one environment. And that itself proves that you are learning and developing to any prospective recruiter. So,
okay, no, I love that. And I really like that you tried other industries before deciding officially. It's very common to leave college and switch around industries. That's nothing to be ashamed of, but I think it was really smart that you fit that in to your college experience. So that's really good advice. And how did you know that you wanted to go into the transportation industry at first? Like, let's not even say electric vehicle.
I don't think I have an answer for that because it's literally been my entire life has been, interested in cars, interested in big machinery, interested in kind of really any sort of automotive space. There was no question in my mind that that's where I wanted to go. My time in the oil industry was really to prove to myself I wanted to do EVs, but even more was to get perspective from outside of automotive just to kind of understand what it could be. Yeah, I don't think there's anything that was like, oh, you know what, automotive would be cool, whatever. It always has been the path. And what I think is interesting is where I sit it's automotive, but it's really automotive tech, if that makes sense. So it's really more a tech company than it is an automotive company, which is awesome because for engineers like us, we get to play around with a bunch of new things. So yeah, I like it.
That is very cool. I love that. Okay, so going back to your position then, do you think that the people around you have similar backgrounds than you? And then what are other sustainable jobs inside your company that maybe people with different backgrounds could apply to?
Yeah, absolutely. So my team is very interesting because it's a very diverse group of engineers. And it focuses on a very different thing than, again, the rest of the engineers at the company, right? We're focused on rapid prototyping. Very quick turnaround, again, high complexity, high cost, low volume solutions. And that is a very different type of engineering than someone designing a part that's now going to go on every vehicle that we put out into the world.
What does that mean, high cost, low impact?
High cost, low volume.
Oh,
so
low volume,
what that
sorry.
means, yeah. So we have a one-time problem, right? We need a test asset to be able to validate something. And so what we do is we work with whoever is requesting this to figure out exactly what they need to prove out the thing that then they are going to put into the market, right? They're going to put into the vehicle, into a product, etc. And that's just, again, one part of it. It's all about supporting the validation as a peripheral team to that core engineering interest. When you are trying to put, again, tens of thousands of one specific part into the market, that's where sustainability comes in, right? That comes where, supply chain and sourcing materials is important. That's where, you need to make sure that you're not breaking things in the field because every time it breaks, that's a new part and that's more resources, etc. Everything from, the energy that the factory runs on and understanding that it's coming from sustainable sources to the physical packaging of the parts as they come into the plant, which is actually made from recycled C plastics, right? So really anything within that process is focused not necessarily on sustainability, but on the maximum possible impact of every little thing that you do, right? And again, I mentioned earlier, there's a sustainability team within our company. Those are people who, come from environmental engineering or come from sustainable policy or come from process engineering, right? And they're reviewing every little part, every little step of from early on designs in a design studio all the way to coming off the factory line and beyond once they're into the customer's hands. Obviously, that's a massive amount of stuff that they can make really, really big impacts on.
I think that's really smart. We had an interior designer, like the first episode, come in and talk about cradle to cradle instead of cradle to gate, which is what a lot of products are doing more, which is instead of just focusing on, okay, it's sustainable until it gets to the consumer, what happens after the consumer has used it? Is that something that your company's doing as well then?
Absolutely. And I think within the electric vehicle space, it's a really big topic of second life, right? There is a massive amount of energy and material cost to build a vehicle battery, right? It's a ton of rare earth minerals, obviously a whole bunch of process and energy to put it together. And when you think about the needs in an electric vehicle, you're thinking about energy density. You're trying to pack as much power as you can to be able to go as far as you can. And it's obviously very important to be able to pack that in. However, once it's kind of beyond the phase of I have my maximum energy density, Obviously the batteries in a vehicle will degrade over their lifetime, just like in your phone. They're not usable anymore, right? They can still be used for other things. So this idea of second life batteries. So what happens when you tie them to a grid, a battery that has, maybe 70% of its original capacity? You can now use that as grid storage for things like, wind or solar, which may be intermittent energy sources. You can balance out the grid needs with the product that you already built that came from an entirely different application. So second life, obviously, massive consideration.
I work in the energy industry, and I didn't know that. Would you say there's a lot of collaboration between the automotive industry and then the energy industry, especially renewables?
I don't know 100%, but it must be. And the reason being is that to support electric vehicles in the world, you need the infrastructure to be able to power them. And I'm sure the energy industry is just wildly talking about all of EV chargers and the energy needs to support those. And it's awesome that finally, within kind of 2021, 2022, there's been this huge shift within not only the automotive industry, but also the energy and infrastructure industry to be able to support more things like fast chargers around the country and around the world, actually. You see it with, President Biden's Infrastructure Act and, giving more tax credits to electric vehicles, supporting the build out of electric vehicle chargers. And so there's a whole ton of collaboration happening, not just within the company, obviously at the government industry level as well. So.
I'm loving this because I feel like I'm coming full circle with so many of these topics, because we just talked with Mike in the last episode about how he helps utilities prepare for the surcharge of electric vehicles coming onto the grid. So you're right, they are absolutely relatable, and they work together. So that's a good point.
Awesome.
So I remember too, when I used to work in a more conservative state, there was a big issue with new electric vehicles coming onto the grid because of a lack of electric vehicle chargers. And then the lack of electric vehicle chargers was because it wasn't getting approved by legislation specific to that state. So how can us people, like just regular voters or maybe just people in general that are involved in policy in our states, help the growth of electric vehicles?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of two sides of this, right? There's the technological innovation for electric vehicles, and then there's the political innovation for electric vehicles. The technological innovation is things like supporting our grids to be able to handle more, the physical power electronics, the batteries to be able to take more power, the vehicles to be more efficient, et cetera, right? And that's already happening within an industry level. The political part of it's very interesting because there is a question of, okay, we're transitioning to electric vehicles, but what does that mean to existing industry and existing jobs, right? So, for example, if you look at a state like West Virginia, they are entirely based on coal. Their major mining industry is based on coal, which is a massive polluter, right? It's a fossil fuel. And the problem with that is that for West Virginia to now transition to electric vehicles would inherently be removing the jobs that the people of West Virginia need. And so being able to do that kind of step up and step change of we change a few jobs to support these people, a few more to this, to this, to this, you can't have one massive ramp up and just say, hey, we're all in electric vehicles. Okay, fine. What can the voter do? The voter needs to be watching for politicians who are playing this from a technological innovation side and not from a political innovation side. You see certain states like, for example, Mississippi, who are actually banning these kind of next generation electric vehicle companies coming in, one, for politics and optics, and two, to save the jobs that's already in the dealer networks, right? So this idea of direct sales, which is effectively not even part of electric vehicles or sustainability, is impacting the adoption of electric vehicles as a whole. So again, you need to be able to look for people in positions of power or people who are writing laws and policy that are supporting the technological side. We need to support chargers. We need to standardize chargers. We need to support with money for communities to add chargers to existing infrastructure instead of those who are going to try and just do everything they can to stonewall for a short-term political gain. So that's my thought.
No, I think that was a very knowledgeable response. Do you think you have a lot of direct interaction with voters because of all the traveling that you've done for these car shows?
I have talked to everyone from someone who has never even heard of our company or an electric vehicle, all the way up to billionaire tech lawyers and company owners who are wildly supportive of electric vehicles, right? And the most interesting thing is that in that entire group of people that I've talked to, everyone came with a different perspective of what it's going to be like in an electric vehicle and what it can do. And as soon as they ride in it or drive it, they leave saying, I want one. Like there is
Nice.
absolutely nobody that I've met that gets out of the vehicle and says, holy crap, like that was terrible, right? This is something that everyone loves.
I think you should have been in sales.
I really should have, and I guess technically my role kind of somewhat is or used to be. So, yeah, no, it's really funny because we talk to people even in, again, as you were mentioning, kind of states that aren't really pushing for electric vehicle adoption. You start talking to the people, and once they've tried it, they're like, okay, I get it. Like I'm on the bandwagon now. But again, there's a whole group of people who maybe I don't interact with all the time who are very culturally against electric vehicles and politically what they stand for. And again, that's one more separation of the technological innovation for electric vehicles and sustainability versus the political side of it. So,
What would you say is people's biggest worry without taking into account like where they stand politically?
yeah, definitely. So I think the two biggest ones that I've heard of are range anxiety. So how far can the vehicle go on one charge? And the lifestyle change that it takes to charge a vehicle, right? The physical driving of the vehicle is not really anyone's concern. So let's talk about those two. The range anxiety comes from the fact that in history, up until, again, maybe 3-4 years ago, electric vehicles were really limited in the battery sizes that were put in them. And they tended to be these very small hatchbacky type cars that could go maybe 100, 150, sometimes 200 miles of range, except in the case of Tesla, who kind of came in as an innovator, right? And so everything up until that was, okay, these electric vehicles are fine, they're here, but they're kind of quirky and they're not really anything that I would want in my lifestyle. And they can't go that far. What happens if you need a charge? There's no chargers anywhere. I'm just going to get stuck in the middle of nowhere. You have that anxiety, which is kind of even still today hampering adoption of electric vehicles. That's not the case anymore. There's vehicles that can go 3, 4, 500 miles on a charge. Some of them even more than gas vehicles. It's gone. The battery technology is here. The other side is the infrastructure, right? Which is the where can I charge, when can I charge things? So there's two main parts of this, right? There's level 2 and level 3 charging. There is a level 1, it's very slow, but it's somewhat of an emergency charge scenario. But the level 2 charger is your anywhere from 8 to 20 miles in an hour of charge. And then your level 3 fast charging, which could be hundreds of miles within 15-20 minutes. The problem with that is it's very expensive to invest in DC fast charging. Obviously less expensive now as we start getting more bills from the government. So people can go in, they can charge, they can walk into a store, they come back out, they've gone from 30 to 75% in 15 minutes, and they don't have to think anything of it, right? Even better than that is for folks who are able to put a level 2 charger in their home. Obviously not a case for everyone, but you come home, you plug it in, you come out the next day, and it's fully charged. And you're good. And there's very few people who are going to be going through 250, 350 miles of range in one day, right? Does that matter for road trips? Yes, it does. Are people doing road trips every day? No, they're not. So two biggest things that I think are kind of hampering adoption. But again, there are solutions to those.
Nice. Would you say that the level 2 are usually found in, as you mentioned, like shopping malls? Like I think everyone is seeing like maybe in their work parking. And then maybe at gas stations, they're trying to put level 3, so the fast charger, so it could be more similar to filling up your car with gas?
Yeah, so level 2s in the public are at tons of offices, I guess large buildings that people tend to spend a lot of time at. And I mean, a lot of time is in, several hours per day. Whereas the fast chargers are going to be in places where people are only there for kind of 15-20 minutes, right? So In your office, you show up, you plug in, you work for 8, 9, 10 hours, depending on what your job is, you unplug, you go home. But then you look at the level 3 chargers, which are in places like on the highway for people to be able to charge up as they're driving, or what I've seen mainly is with big box stores. So things like Targets, Walmarts, Whole Foods, all these big stores that are trying to attract people in, have them charge, go shop at their store for 30 minutes and go out, and they don't have any effectively range loss over their trip because they were able to charge during their trip. That's where I see it really growing. But I think, to be honest, we're going to start seeing even the fast chargers popping up at really odd, obscure places. I know by me, there's tons like in random parking garages. Obviously, I live in California, so they're a lot more prevalent than other parts of the country. But you can't go 3 miles without finding a stack of level 3 fast chargers. So,
Nice. Okay, no, this is great information. Thank you for sharing.
of course.
All right, the next part of this is I'm going to ask everyone that I interview to share their salary ranges, just because I think it's a good idea and to inspire people. So let's do it. All right, so from 60K or below, I'm going to call it the battery electric vehicles category. From 60 to 90K, I'm going to call it the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. From 90 to 120,000 a year, I'm going to call it the hybrid electric vehicles. And then from 120 or above, I'm going to call it the fuel cell electric vehicle. How are those categories? Good?
I like the categories. I would have actually flipped them, but I like the names. I would be within the fuel cell vehicle category. Obviously, where I work and what I do is a very specialized field. It's also very high cost of living, so it's something to account for. However, within the industry itself, if you are of someone who's kind of an engineering background, you're interested in automotive technology, and you have skills that are, I guess, applicable to a specific role, this is an industry that will compete with other companies to be able to get you at those companies, right? Just because of how specific it is. And they're also competing with, big tech. They're competing with all sorts of, international consulting firms to get these people to do analysis roles. So it's very hard for them to not compete from a compensation side to be able to get those people.
Okay, nice. And actually, as a part 2 to these questions that I'm going to start asking people is, how's your work-life balance? Because sometimes you get a good salary, but you have to pay with your personal time. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say for the first few years that I worked, it was absolutely deplorable. Again, I was in a role that required me to be on call all the time. I was on the road. I was traveling. I've got several 4 a.m. calls saying, hey, can you get on the first flight to blank? Was back and forth East Coast to West Coast weekly for a period of time to the Midwest. I'm from the East Coast. I live in the West Coast. So, the amount of travel that I did just to support this role and support living here for this role was a ton. In fact, through 2020, I traveled more than I ever have in my life. As everyone else was locked down, I was on flights with, I guess, 4 people in May or June of 2020. It's really interesting. But what was nice is that as we grew as a company, we had more resources and we had more processes. I was able to stop doing all of that travel, the late nights, the kind of the extra needed to support this role, because we now had a team that we were able to do everything we needed to do using kind of main working hours. That's not to say that we don't work extra hours. I was in yesterday just on a Saturday because I needed to do something, right? And there's times where people are like, hey, I want to fix up this car and let's go off-roading or something. Yeah, let's do it. Let's work. I guess it's technically more in the really work-life fusion. But no, you are able to have a very sustainable, no pun intended, work-life balance if that's the role that you're trying to go for. If you're trying to put in everything you can to this job, you want to put in even 120%, you could easily get by with a 50-hour work week. So,
but you might not get invited to off-roading trips.
Yeah. I mean, you might, but yeah, it's a lot easier once you have set some boundaries. We enjoy the myth of unlimited vacation, which means that you have that flexibility to be able to go forth and say, hey, you know what, these 2 days I'm off, but I'm going to get everything done before I leave. So
yeah. Oh, I get that. Unlimited PTO. That's a whole other topic. All right, so this has been awesome. I think you put a lot of good information out there. Is there any advice that you would like to give someone that's trying to get into your industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely an industry that's pretty specialized in that automotive is a massive, massive, massive product, right? There is a whole ton of stuff you can do within it, but the industry itself is very much a traditional industry. There's a side of it, which is, again, where I'm in, which is automotive technology, so more like the tech industry. And for someone trying to get into either of those two, the things you need really are the ability to learn new skills, because a lot of the build topics within automotive aren't necessarily the same things you're going to get if you're coming from a traditional office job, for example. So any sort of hands-on skills or really critical thinking skills are super important. The other thing would just be, be passionate about automotive. I mean, the amount of people I work with who are car nuts. Today's Sunday. I'm seeing people's stories of cars and coffee, at new car museums. Like, again, I mentioned people go off-roading at my company all the time. And so just being part of that community is going to really help you enjoy what you do if you are within automotive. So that's my thought.
I love that. I think that's a great message. And then just to be clear, you do not have to get a master's to get this job, right?
Nope, absolutely not. I do not have a master's.
Woo-hoo. We love that. Well,
right.
Unless you want to get your master's, which is fine. Okay, well, thank you so much, Josh. This has been amazing. This has been a great conversation, and I hope that you inspire a lot of people to join your industry.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was awesome to talk.